You are hiding in the dark. Someone is kicking down your bedroom door. You have 3 seconds to dial 911, but your hands are slick with your own blood and your phone screen is shattered. You misdial by 1 single digit. A man answers. He isn't a police dispatcher. He's a monster. But for the next 20 minutes, he's your monster. This is the story of a wrong number that burned a city to the ground. Listen closely. The wood of the front door didn't splinter like they show in the movies. It gave way with a sickening, wet crack, tearing the deadbolt right out of the drywall. Lily didn't scream. She didn't have the breath for it. She was already moving, her bare feet slipping on the cheap linoleum of the kitchen floor. Her shoulder clipped the edge of the counter, sending a ceramic bowl crashing to the ground. A jagged shard clipped her ankle. She didn't feel it. Adrenaline was a thick, buzzing static in her ears, drowning out the pain. She scrambled down the narrow hallway of her apartment, her chest heaving. The lights were off. The only illumination came from the sickly orange glow of the street lamp bleeding through the blinds. Behind her, heavy boots crunched over this broken ceramic. 2 sets of footsteps. A man laughed, a low, wet sound that made the hair on Lily's arms stand up. "Tommy's little sister is home," a voice called out. It echoed in the small space. Tommy. Of course it was about Tommy. Her brother had been a ghost for 3 weeks, leaving behind nothing but unpaid rent and a trail of bad decisions. Now his decisions were standing in her living room. Lily threw herself into her bedroom and locked the door. It was a flimsy piece of hollow core wood. It wouldn't hold them for more than 10 seconds. She needed a place they wouldn't look immediately. The closet. She opened the bifold doors, shoved aside a row of heavy winter coats, and wedged herself into the back corner, pulling a plastic storage bin in front of her legs. It smelled of mothballs and stale dust in here. The darkness was absolute. She dug into the pocket of her sweatpants and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking violently. Blood from a deep scrape on her palm. She must have cut it when she fell against the counter, smeared across the cracked glass of the screen. Unlock. Her thumb wouldn't register through the blood. She wiped it frantically on her thigh, smearing crimson into the grey fabric. Unlock. The keypad appeared. She needed 911. Outside her bedroom door, the footsteps stopped. The brass doorknob rattled. Locked. One of the men grunted. "Kick it." Lily's breath hitched. She tapped the glass. 9. The first kick hit the bedroom door. The frame groaned. She tapped again. 1. The second kick landed. The wood around the hinges started to splinter. She went for the final 1, but her bloody thumb slipped on the spiderweb crack of the screen. She didn't even look at what she pressed. She just hit the green call button and jammed the phone against her ear. Ring, ring. The bedroom door gave way with a massive crash. It slammed against the drywall, leaving a dent. Lily clamped her free hand over her mouth. She squeezed her eyes shut. She tried to make herself as small as humanly possible, curling her knees to her chest. Through the receiver, the ringing stopped. The line clicked open. 911, what is your emergency? Lily prayed to hear. Instead, a voice answered. Deep, rough, and irritated. Yeah. Lily froze. The voice was wrong. There was no static, no call center background noise, just a faint, rhythmic thumping of a bass line and the clinking of ice in a glass. Hello, she whispered. Her voice was barely a thread of sound. Please. Silence on the line. Then the man spoke again. His tone shifted, dropping an octave. The irritation vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. Who is this? I need help. Lily choked out, tears finally hot and fast on her cheeks. 442 West Elm. Apartment 3B? They broke in? They have guns. Please hurry. She heard one of the men in her bedroom tearing the sheets off her bed. A lamp shattered against the wall. Check under the bed. the gruff voice said, mere feet away from the closet doors. Lily pressed the phone so hard against her ear it ached. "They're in my room," she breathed into the receiver. "They're looking for my brother. Please, tell the officers to hurry." A heavy pause on the other end. "You didn't dial 911, the man said. Lily's stomach dropped. The bottom fell out of her world. She pulled the phone away from her face just enough to look at the screen in the pitch black. The bloody smudge covered the digits. She had hit a 4 or a 7. She didn't know. "Oh, God," she whimpered. She was going to die. She had one chance, one call, and she gave it to a stranger. She moved her thumb to end the call, to try again. "Don't hang up." The command was absolute. It wasn't a request. It was a verbal iron grip around her wrist. Lily froze, the phone still pressed to her ear. "Breathe through your nose," the man said. "If you breathe through your mouth, they'll hear your teeth chattering. Who are they looking for?" "My brother," she whispered, squeezing her eyes shut as a heavy boot kicked the frame of her bed. "Tommy Gallagher." A quiet hum vibrated through the phone. It was a sound of recognition. "Tommy Gallagher," the man repeated. His voice sounded like gravel grinding over ice. "Little Tommy. He owes a lot of people." "Who are you?" Lily breathed. "Keep your mouth shut and listen to me," the stranger said softly. "Are you in a closet?" "Yes." "Do they know you're in the apartment?" "Yes, they saw me." The sound of shattering glass echoed through her bedroom. One of the thugs was smashing her vanity mirror. "She ain't under the bed," the thug grunted. "Then she's in the closet, you idiot," the other one replied. Lily stopped breathing. Her chest locked up. This was it. She squeezed the phone, waiting for the doors to rip open. "Put the phone in your pocket," the voice on the line ordered. Calm, methodical. "Leave the line open. Do not make a sound." Victor Rossi sat back in the leather chair of his office, the phone pressed flat against his ear. The heavy bass of the club downstairs vibrated through the floorboards, but he tuned it out. He stared at the glowing screen of his desk monitor. He didn't need to trace the call. She had given him the address. 442 West Elm. It was a rotting brick tenement building in the East End. His territory. He took a slow sip of his bourbon. The ice clicked against the crystal. On the other end of the line, he heard the frantic, shallow breathing of a terrified woman. And beneath that, the heavy, careless movements of two men tearing a room apart. Victor recognized the name Tommy Gallagher. Tommy was a rat. A low-level runner who skimmed off the top of a shipment 2 weeks ago and vanished into the wind. Victor had put a bounty on him. A small one, barely worth the paper it was printed on. But Victor hadn't sent anyone to West Elm tonight, which meant the two men tearing up that apartment were freelancers, scavengers trying to collect the debt before Victor did. Or worse, rivals encroaching on his streets. Nobody stepped on Victor's streets without asking. He stood up. He didn't rush. He buttoned the front of his charcoal suit jacket, checking the weight of the Sig Sauer holstered under his left arm. Through the phone, he heard a muffled voice. "Come out, little bird. We ain't gonna hurt you if you just tell us where Tommy stashed the bricks." Victor walked out of his office. The hallway was dark, lined with soundproofing foam. Two men in dark suits stood at the end of the hall. Marco and Lev. "Bring the car around back," Victor said quietly. Marco frowned. "Boss, we have the sit-down with the Albanians in 20. "Cancel it." Victor didn't wait for a response. He kept the phone to his ear as he walked down the back stairwell into the damp, rain-slicked alley behind the club. The girl was holding her breath. He could hear the distinct lack of air on the line. He could picture her, curled up, eyes wide, waiting for the inevitable. It was a pathetic, small thing to die in a closet over a brother's mistake. Most nights Victor wouldn't care. People died in his city every hour. It was the ecosystem he ruled. But she had called him. Out of millions of combinations, her bleeding, shaking finger had dialed his private line. A line only a dozen people in the city had. He slid into the back of the black town car. Lev got behind the wheel. Marco took shotgun. "West Elm," Victor said. 442. Drive fast. The tires squealed against the wet asphalt. Victor pressed the phone tighter to his ear. "I'm on my way," he murmured into the receiver. He knew she couldn't answer. He just needed her to know she wasn't alone in the dark. In the closet, Lily heard the deep voice from the phone resting in her sweatpants pocket. It was muffled, but the words registered. "I'm on my way." She didn't know if she was relieved or more terrified. Who was this man? Why was he coming? Outside the closet doors, the two men were arguing. "Just open the damn thing," one said. "You open it. What if she's got a knife?" "She's a 100-pound girl, Ricky. You scared?" Lily squeezed her eyes shut. She gripped a wire hanger above her, her knuckles turning white. She didn't have a knife. She had nothing. The floorboards creaked right in front of the bifold doors. She could see the scuffed toes of a pair of work boots through the narrow slit at the bottom of the closet. "All right, sweetheart," the man named Ricky said. His voice was right on the other side of the thin wood. "Time's up." Lily stopped breathing entirely. Her lungs burned. She waited for the doors to yank open. She waited for the rough hands to grab her hair, to pull her into the harsh light. Instead, the screech of tires echoed from the street below, cutting through the silence of the bedroom. It was loud enough that even the thugs paused. A heavy car door slammed. Then another. "Cops?" Ricky asked, his voice dropping in volume. "No sirens," the other man replied. "Look out the window." The heavy boots moved away from the closet door. Lily let out a microscopic exhale. "Black Lincoln," the second man said. "Tinted windows. 2 guys getting out. Suits." "Suits? Feds?" "Feds don't drive Lincolns, you idiot." A pause. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the bedroom. "Oh, hell. What? That's Lev. Rossi's guy, the big Russian." "Rossi!" Ricky's voice pitched up, genuine panic bleeding into his tone. "What the hell is Rossi doing here? This is a quiet grab. Tommy owed him, sure, but he wouldn't come down here himself." "Grab your piece," the second man snapped. "We go out the fire escape." Lily listened, her heart hammering against her ribs. Rossi. The name meant nothing to her, but it clearly meant death to the men in her room. Downstairs, the heavy oak door of the apartment building didn't creak open. It was blown off its hinges. The sound reverberated up the stairwell, a concussive thud that shook the floor under Lily's feet. The man she had called wasn't the police. He was something much, much worse. Heavy, unhurried footsteps echoed on the stairs outside the apartment. They didn't sound like a SWAT team rushing a building. They sounded like a landlord coming to collect the rent. "Window, now!" Ricky hissed. Lily heard the scrape of the old sash window being forced upward. The rusted metal ground loudly. Then the front door of her apartment, already damaged by the break-in, was kicked open the rest of the way. It slammed into the wall and shattered. The footsteps entered her living room. Lily pressed her hands over her ears, but she couldn't block out the sound. "Rossi, hey man, listen!" One of the thugs yelled from the bedroom, his voice cracking. "We were just looking for Tommy's stash. We didn't know you laid claim to the apartment." Silence. There were no demands to put hands up. No reading of Miranda rights. Just a quiet, methodical advance down the hallway. Ricky panicked. He fired a shot. The bang of the handgun in the enclosed apartment was deafening. Lily squeezed her eyes tight and whimpered. The response was immediate. But it wasn't a loud bang. It was a sharp, mechanical spit. Thwip! Thwip! Ricky gagged. A wet, heavy sound followed as 200 pounds of dead weight collapsed against the cheap drywall, sliding down to the floor with a dull thud. "Jesus!" the second man screamed. He fired blindly into the hallway. 3 loud shots tearing through plaster. Thwip! A sharp cry of pain. A body hit the hardwood floor, writhing. "Please!" the second man begged. His voice was a wet, gurgling sob. "Please, God, I didn't know. I swear on my mother I didn't know she was yours." Footsteps entered the bedroom. They moved slowly, purposefully. "She isn't," a voice said. It was the voice from the phone, the gravel and smoke. But hearing it in person, without the static of the line, it was colder. It possessed a chilling, absolute authority. Thwip. The begging stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. Lily sat in the dark closet, frozen in a rictus of terror. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. Her phone was still in her pocket, the line still technically open. She heard the soft rustle of fabric, a man checking his suit jacket. Then the heavy footsteps approached the closet. They stopped right outside the bifold doors. Lily stared through the slats. All she could see was a pair of immaculately polished black leather shoes. Blood was pooling on the hardwood floor just inches from the toe of the right shoe, seeping into the grain. "Open the door," the voice said. It was quiet, conversational. Lily's hands wouldn't work. Her brain sent the signal to her arms, but her muscles refused to obey. She was paralyzed. "I won't ask twice," he said softly. Trembling uncontrollably, Lily reached out and pushed the wooden slat. The bifold door creaked open, folding outward. Light flooded the small space. Lily flinched, holding a hand up to shield her eyes. When her vision adjusted, she looked up. He was tall, broader than she expected. He wore a dark charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than her entire apartment. His tie was perfectly straight. His dark hair was slicked back, a few stray strands falling over his forehead. But it was his eyes that pinned her to the floor. They were dark, assessing, and utterly void of warmth. They looked at her the way a man looks at a complex puzzle. In his right hand, resting casually by his side, was a black handgun with a long cylindrical suppressor screwed onto the barrel. A thin wisp of grey smoke was curling from the tip. He looked down at her. She was a mess. Sweatpants, an oversized t-shirt, bare feet. Her face was pale, smeared with dirt, and her own blood from the cut on her hand. She looked like a cornered animal. Victor reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the red button. In Lily's pocket, the faint hum of the open connection died. "You can breathe now," Victor said. Lily let out a ragged, shuddering gasp. The air burned her lungs. She looked past his legs. The bedroom was a slaughterhouse. One man lay slumped against the wall, a hole perfectly centered in his forehead. The other was face down on the rug, a pool of dark blood expanding around him. Her stomach lurched. She clamped a hand over her mouth, fighting the violent urge to vomit. Victor stepped to the side, blocking her view of the bodies. "Look at me," he commanded. She snapped her gaze up to his face. "You didn't dial 911, he stated. Lily shook her head slowly. My screen. It was broken. My hand was slipping." Victor stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. He holstered the weapon beneath his jacket with a fluid, practiced motion. He reached into his breast pocket, withdrew a clean white handkerchief, and tossed it into her lap. "Wipe your face," he said. "You look like a corpse." Lily picked up the linen square. It smelled faintly of expensive cologne and ozone. She dabbed at the blood on her forehead, her hands still violently shaking. 2 large men in dark suits stepped into the doorway of the bedroom. They looked at the bodies, then at Victor. "Clean it up," Victor told them, without breaking eye contact with Lily. "Roll them in the rug. Take them to the harbor." "Yes, boss," the taller one said in a thick Russian accent. Victor looked back down at Lily. He extended a hand toward her. The cuff of his crisp white shirt had a single, tiny speck of blood on it. Lily looked at his hand. It was a lifeline, but it belonged to a man who had just murdered 2 people in front of her without blinking. "If you stay in this apartment," Victor said, his voice dropping low, "more will come. Tommy stole from dangerous people. Today it was freelancers. Tomorrow it will be a cartel. You will not survive tomorrow." Lily swallowed hard. Where am I supposed to go?" "With me," Victor said. It wasn't an invitation. It was a statement of fact. Lily looked at the blood on the floor. She looked at her broken door. She looked at the man offering her a hand. She had dialed the wrong number, but as she placed her small, trembling hand into his large, warm one, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want him to let go. Victor didn't haul her up by the arm. He let her find her footing, his grip firm but strangely anchored. When Lily's knees buckled, the adrenaline finally abandoning her system in a sudden, sickening drop, his hand shifted, catching her elbow and pulling her flush against his side. He felt like a wall of solid rock beneath the expensive wool of his suit. "Walk," he said. The command was pitched low, vibrating in his chest. Lily moved. She had to. If she stopped, if she actually looked at the man named Ricky bleeding out on her cheap thrift store rug, she would lose her mind. She kept her eyes locked on the scuffed toes of her own bare feet. Left, right, left. Over the shattered wood of the doorframe, over the broken ceramic bowl in the hallway. Marco was standing by the front door. He didn't look at her. He was busy feeding a fresh magazine into his weapon, the metallic clack-clack sounding obscenely loud in the quiet hallway. Victor guided her past him, down the dimly lit stairwell. The air out here smelled like damp concrete and stale cigarette smoke. Normal smells. A violent juxtaposition to the copper tang of blood she had just left behind. Outside, the street was deserted. The neighborhood knew better than to poke their heads out when gunfire rang through the thin walls. Rain had started to fall, a cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the pavement and made the street lamps bleed yellow into the puddles. Lev was waiting by the back door of the black Lincoln. He opened it as they approached. Victor gently pushed Lily into the back seat. She slid across the pristine, cream-colored leather, leaving a faint smudge of dirt from her sweatpants. She pulled her knees to her chest, curling into the far corner. Victor got in beside her. The door clicked shut, severing the sound of the rain. The silence inside the car was absolute. The windows were heavily tinted, reducing the outside world to a murky, blurred film. It felt like a sensory deprivation tank. "Drive," Victor said. The engine rumbled to life, a deep, powerful purr that vibrated through the floorboards. Lev pulled away from the curb smoothly. No screeching tires, no rush, just a steady, deliberate glide away from a double homicide. Lily stared at her hands. They were shaking again. A fine, high-frequency tremor that made her fingers look blurred. The cut on her palm was sluggishly weeping blood, the edges jagged and raw. A heavy, warm weight dropped into her lap. Lily flinched, snapping her head up. It was a first aid kit, a compact, hard-shell plastic case. "Clean the cut," Victor said. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring out the window, his profile harsh and unreadable in the passing streetlights. Infection is a stupid way to die. Lily stared at the kit. Her fingers fumbled with the plastic latches. They wouldn't open. She tried again, her thumbs slipping. A pathetic, wet sound escaped the back of her throat. A half sob, half hiccup. A large hand reached over and popped the latches with zero effort. Victor flipped the lid open. Inside were neat rows of sterile gauze, antiseptic wipes, and medical tape. He didn't offer to help her further. He just withdrew his hand and returned his gaze to the window. Lily tore open a small square packet with her teeth. The sharp smell of alcohol flooded the small space in the back seat. She pressed the wipe to her palm. It burned like absolute fire. She hissed, biting down hard on her lower lip to keep from crying out. She scrubbed the dirt and dried blood away, the pain grounding her. It forced the horrific image of Ricky's lifeless eyes out of her immediate vision. She taped a square of gauze over the wound, wrapping it tight. When she was done, she leaned her head back against the leather seat and closed her eyes. "Where are you taking me?" she whispered. Her voice was raspy, completely stripped of its usual warmth. "Somewhere safe," Victor replied. "There's no such thing." It wasn't an accusation. It was a cynical, flat statement of fact. She was a girl from the East End. She knew how the world worked. Safety was a luxury afforded to people with money and distance. She currently had neither. Victor turned his head slowly. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the closet. His dark eyes mapped the exhaustion in her posture, the cynical resignation settling into the line of her shoulders. "You're right," he said softly. "But there are degrees of danger. Tonight you are in my degree, which means you breathe." Lily didn't answer. She just watched the rain slide down the tinted glass, wondering what exactly her brother had done to drag a man like Victor Rossi to their doorstep. The Lincoln didn't stop in a warehouse district or a dark alley. It glided smoothly into the underground parking garage of a high-rise building in the financial district. The concrete was spotless, bathed in the stark, white glare of fluorescent lights. Lev parked the car in a private bay sectioned off by a heavy steel mesh gate. "Come," Victor said, stepping out. Lily followed. Her bare feet slapped against the cold concrete. She shivered, the damp chill of the night finally catching up to her. They walked to a private elevator. Victor swiped a heavy black card over the sensor. The doors slid open instantly. There were no buttons inside, only a small keyhole. Victor inserted a key, turned it, and the elevator began a rapid, silent ascent. Lily watched the digital display climb. 20, 30, 45. It stopped at 50. The penthouse. The doors opened, and Lily stepped into a different universe. The apartment was sprawling, all floor-to-ceiling glass, dark wood, and brushed steel. The city lights of the skyline stretched out below them, a glittering grid of white and amber. It was breathtaking, cold, and entirely devoid of anything personal. There were no photographs, no clutter, just expensive, minimalist furniture and the faint hum of a high-end climate control system. "Lev," Victor said, shedding his suit jacket and tossing it over the back of a charcoal sofa. "Have Maria prepare the guest room. Find the girl some clothes, something she isn't swimming in." "Yes, boss." Lev disappeared down a long hallway. Victor rolled up his shirt sleeves, exposing thick, heavily scarred forearms. He walked over to a wet bar built into the wall and picked up a crystal decanter. Amber liquid splashed into a heavy glass. "There is a bathroom down the hall to your right," Victor said, not turning around. "Shower. Throw those clothes in the trash bin. They're ruined." Lily looked down at herself. The grey sweatpants were stained dark with a mixture of dirt and her own blood. She felt disgusting. The grime of the apartment, the smell of cordite, the sheer terror. It felt like a physical film coating her skin. She walked down the hallway without a word. The bathroom was larger than her entire bedroom back at West Elm. The shower was a massive enclosure of black slate and glass. Lily stripped mechanically. She threw the ruined clothes into a sleek chrome wastebasket. She stepped into the shower and turned the water on as hot as she could stand it. She stood directly under the rainhead fixture. The scalding water hit her skin, turning it a violent pink. She closed her eyes, resting her forehead against the cold slate wall. It hit her then. The delayed shock. The violent tremor started in her legs and worked its way up to her chest, rattling her teeth. A ragged, ugly sob ripped its way out of her throat, echoing off the tile. She clamped both hands over her mouth, muffling the sound. She couldn't fall apart. If she fell apart in this man's house, she wouldn't survive the night. She was entirely at his mercy. He had killed 2 men casually, as if he were swiping a fly off a table. What would he do to a weeping liability? She stood there for 20 minutes, letting the water wash the blood, the sweat, and the fear down the drain. She scrubbed her skin until it burned. When she stepped out, there was a stack of folded clothes on the marble vanity counter, a pair of black silk pajama pants, and a soft, oversized grey cashmere sweater. Next to them was a fresh bandage for her hand. She dried off and dressed. The clothes felt absurdly luxurious against her skin. It was a jarring contrast to the reality of her situation. She was a hostage wrapped in cashmere. She walked back out to the main living area. Victor was sitting in a leather armchair, a glass of bourbon in one hand, staring out at the city. He didn't look up when she entered. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the sofa opposite him with his glass. Lily sat. The leather yielded under her weight, soft and supple. She pulled the sleeves of the sweater over her hands, making herself as small as possible. "You have questions?" Victor said, finally turning his dark eyes onto her. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was steady now. The shower had washed away the panic, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. "My name is Victor Rossi. You live in the East End, which means you know what I do, even if you don't know my face." Lily's stomach clenched. The Rossi family. They ran the docks, the underground casinos, the narcotics flowing through the eastern seaboard. They weren't just a gang. They were an institution. "What did Tommy do?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Victor took a slow sip of his drink. The ice clinked. "Your brother is an ambitious idiot," Victor said flatly. 3 weeks ago, he was tasked with moving a shipment of product from a warehouse at the docks to a distribution point in the Narrows. He never arrived. He vanished with $400,000 worth of heroin. Lily closed her eyes. "Tommy, you absolute moron." "Those men tonight?" Lily started. "Freelancers," Victor interrupted. "Bounty hunters looking for a quick payout. Word got out that Tommy ran. They thought they could find him, take the drugs, and sell them back to me at a premium. And you killed them for trying. I killed them because they broke down a door in my territory without my permission, and they made a mess." Victor's tone was entirely conversational, completely devoid of malice. It was chilling. Lily swallowed hard. "I don't know where he is. I haven't spoken to him in a month. I swear to God." "I know." Lily blinked, confused. You know. Then why did you come for me?" Victor leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. The space between them suddenly felt suffocatingly small. "Because, Lily," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble, "Tommy didn't just steal my property. He made me look weak. And in my world, weakness is blood in the water. I need him found." "I can't help you find him." "You can," Victor corrected smoothly. "Because wherever Tommy is hiding, eventually, he will check on you. He will reach out. And when he does, you are going to hand him to me." Lily stared at the man sitting across from her. He was asking her to sign her brother's death warrant. "No," she said. The word was out of her mouth before she could think better of it. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the threat of violence. Victor didn't yell. He didn't pull a gun. He simply tilted his head, watching her with a detached, clinical interest. "No," he repeated softly. "He's my brother," Lily said, her voice shaking but her chin rising slightly. "He's a screw-up. He's an addict. He makes terrible choices. but I will not hand him over to be executed. Victor sat back in his chair. A very small, very cold smile touched the corner of his mouth. It didn't reach his eyes. Loyalty is a rare commodity. Victor mused, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. It's also a fatal flaw if misplaced. Let me explain the reality of your situation, Lily. You are not a guest here. You are collateral. He set the glass down on the glass-topped coffee table with a sharp click. Your brother stole $500,000. The debt belongs to your bloodline now. I saved your life tonight. That buys you exactly one thing. Time. You stay here. You don't leave this penthouse. You wait. If Tommy calls, you give him to me. If you refuse, or if Tommy never calls... He let the sentence hang in the air, a guillotine suspended by a thread. Then what? Lily demanded, her heart hammering against her ribs. You kill me. I don't kill civilians, Victor said smoothly, but I will put you back in that apartment on West Elm, and I will broadcast to every scavenger in this city that Victor Rossi no longer claims the girl. How long do you think you'll survive before the cartels come looking for the missing bricks? Lily felt the blood drain from her face. It was a brilliant, horrific trap. He didn't have to touch her, he just had to remove his protection, and the wolves would tear her apart. She looked away, staring out at the glittering skyline. The city looked beautiful from up here. A million lights, a million lives, all completely oblivious to the cold, transactional horror taking place in this room. You're a monster, she'd whispered. I'm a businessman, Victor corrected gently. I run an ecosystem. Eaters and the eaten. Your brother tried to be an eater, and he failed. Now he pays the price. It's just money to you, Lily said, turning back to him, a flash of genuine anger breaking through her fear. You probably make $500,000 in a day. You have this penthouse, the cars, the suits. It's pocket change. You're going to kill my brother over pocket change. Victor's eyes hardened. The detached amusement vanished, replaced by something much darker, much more dangerous. He stood up, moving with a fluid grace that belonged to a predator. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, stopping right in front of her. Lily shrank back into the leather sofa, her breath catching in her throat. Victor leaned down, placing a hand on the back of the sofa, boxing her in. He smelled of bourbon, rain, and cold iron. It is never about the money, Victor said, his voice a lethal hiss, mere inches from her face. It is about the order of things. If I let a street-level runner walk away with my product, tomorrow a crew boss takes a warehouse. The next day, a rival family makes a play for the docks. The structure collapses. Blood fills the streets. Thousands die because I let one rat scurry away. Lily stared up at him, paralyzed by the sheer proximity and intensity of the man. I don't care about your brother, Victor continued, his dark eyes locked onto hers. I care about the precedent. You think I'm a monster because I'm willing to kill him. You have no idea what a monster truly is. Be grateful you're sitting in my living room and not in the back of a van bound for Tijuana. He held her gaze for a long, suffocating moment. Lily didn't blink. She couldn't. She was terrified, yes, but beneath the terror, a strange, cynical resignation was taking root. She was ruined. Tommy had ruined her. Okay, Lily whispered finally. The fight drained out of her, leaving her hollow. Victor pulled back slightly, his eyes searching her face. Okay, what? Okay, I understand. She looked down at her lap, staring at her bandaged hand. I'm the bait. I sit here in my cashmere sweater and wait for the rat to crawl into the trap. Victor straightened up. He looked down at her, a flicker of something unreadable passing behind his eyes. It wasn't pity. It might have been respect. Get some sleep, Lily, he said, turning away and walking toward his own quarters. The guest room is the second door on the left. Lock it if it makes you feel better, though it won't keep me out if I decide I want in. He disappeared down the hall. Lily sat alone in the vast, silent living room. She pulled her knees to her chest, hugging her legs tight. She had dialed a wrong number. A single, bloody digit had ripped her out of her miserable, normal life and dropped her into a gilded cage suspended over a pit of vipers. She wasn't going to die tonight. But as she looked around the pristine, cold penthouse, she realized she had absolutely no idea how she was going to survive tomorrow. 3 days passed. 72 hours of sterile, climate-controlled isolation. Lily learned the rhythms of the penthouse quickly. It was a mechanism of clockwork precision. At 6 in the morning, the heavy thud of a punching bag echoed from the far end of the hall. Victor worked out with a brutal, punishing intensity. At 8, Maria, a silent, older woman who looked right through Lily, arrived to clean and prepare meals. By 9, Victor was gone, leaving behind the lingering scent of espresso and expensive cologne. He returned after midnight. Sometimes he brought the metallic smell of gunpowder with him. Sometimes it was just the heavy, exhausting scent of city smog and cheap cigar smoke from a backroom sit-down. Lily spent her days staring at the skyline. She paced the length of the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was an inmate in an ivory tower. She wore the expensive clothes Maria left for her: cashmere, silk, tailored wool. She ate the seared salmon and organic vegetables placed on the kitchen island. Her physical wounds healed. The cut on her hand scabbed over. The bruises on her ribs faded to a dull, sickly yellow. But the psychological rot was setting in. On the 4th night, Victor came home early. It was barely 10 o'clock. Lily was sitting at the massive oak dining table. She had a deck of cards she found in a drawer spread out in front of her, playing a mechanical game of solitaire. She didn't look up when the heavy front door clicked shut. She just listened to the sound of him removing his suit jacket, the dull thud of his shoulder holster hitting the console table. He walked into the dining area. He stopped at the edge of the table, looking down at her game. "Red 7 on the black 8. He pointed out, his voice a low gravel scrape in the quiet room. Lily stared at the cards. She moved the 7. She didn't speak. Victor pulled out a chair opposite her and sat down. He loosened his silk tie and unbuttoned his collar. He looked tired. Not physically, but with a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that sat heavy behind his dark eyes. "You haven't asked for a phone," he noted. "Who would I call?" Lily replied, flipping another card. "A black king. Nowhere to put it. My friends think I'm dead or hiding. My landlord probably changed the locks. My brother is a ghost. I don't exist outside of this room right now." "Self-pity doesn't suit you." Lily finally looked up. Her eyes were hard, the cynical shell of the East End girl fully hardened over the trauma of the break-in. "It's not self-pity," she said flatly. "It's situational awareness. I'm a hostage, a very comfortable hostage, but a hostage nonetheless. If I scream for help, your Russian bodyguard breaks my neck before I reach the elevator. If I try to run, you throw me back to the wolves. So I play cards." A faint, dangerous smirk touched the corner of Victor's mouth. He reached out and tapped the deck of cards with a heavy, calloused finger. "You adapt quickly," he murmured. "I grew up with Tommy. You learn to adapt when the rent money disappears 3 days before the 1st of the month." The mention of her brother sucked the oxygen out of the room. The temporary ceasefire vanished. Victor leaned back, his eyes narrowing, studying her like a ledger of debts. "He's running out of places to hide," Victor said quietly. "My men squeezed the Narrows today. We found his car. He abandoned it under the overpass on 4th Street. He's on foot. No money, no product. The scavengers are circling." Lily's stomach clenched, but she forced her face to remain completely neutral. She gathered the cards, squaring the deck with short, sharp taps against the table. "He'll call soon," Victor stated. It wasn't a guess. It was a guarantee. "And when he does, You expect me to serve him up on a silver platter. I expect you to survive, Victor corrected gently. I told you, Lily, you owe a debt. It gets paid one way or another. He's my blood. Blood is just a biological accident, Victor shot back, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Loyalty is a choice. Tommy chose to steal. He chose to put a target on your back. He traded your life for $400,000 in heroin. That is the reality of your blood. He stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Stop romanticizing a rat, he said, turning away. Before he could take a second step, a sharp, electronic trill pierced the silence. Lily froze. The sound was coming from the pocket of the cashmere cardigan she was wearing. It was the burner phone Victor had given her on the second day, strictly for receiving the call. The ringing echoed in the massive room. It sounded like an alarm bell on a sinking ship. Victor stopped. He didn't turn around immediately. The tension in his broad shoulders was a physical, rigid thing. Slowly, he pivoted back to face her. His eyes were utterly unreadable. A black void. Answer it, he commanded softly. Lily's hand trembled as she reached into her pocket. The plastic of the cheap phone felt heavy, slick with the sudden sweat on her palm. She looked at the screen. Unknown caller. She looked up at Victor. He merely nodded once. Lily pressed the green button and lifted the phone to her ear. Hello? Nori. The voice was thin, scraped raw, breathless and terrified. It was Tommy. Tommy! Her voice cracked on his name. The sound of him, broken and pathetic, shattered the cynical armor she had spent 3 days building. Nori, oh God, you're alive! Tommy choked out. A harsh, rattling cough interrupted him. I went back to the apartment. The door was gone. There was blood. I thought... He sounded like a frightened child. Not a cartel runner, not a thief. Just the stupid little boy who used to break the neighbors' windows with baseballs and beg Lily to take the blame. I'm alive, she whispered, her eyes locked on Victor. The mob boss stood perfectly still, watching her every micro-expression. I screwed up, Nori, Tommy sobbed into the receiver. I screwed up so bad. It wasn't supposed to go like this. The Colombians, they fronted me cash. I thought I could flip Rossi's product and pay them back before anyone noticed. But they found out. They want the bricks. Rossi wants the bricks. Where are the bricks, Tommy? Lily asked. Her voice sounded hollow to her own ears. Gone, he wheezed. The Colombians took them. They cornered me at the docks. I barely got away. I have nothing. Rossi has a bounty on my head. I can't even walk down the street. He was a dead man walking. Lily knew it. Victor knew it. Tommy knew it. Nori, you gotta help me, Tommy begged. I need cash. Just a couple grand. Enough to get a bus to Mexico. Please, you're the only one I have left. Lily closed her eyes. The tears finally spilled over, hot and fast, tracking down her cheeks. She held the phone tight against her ear. Where are you? She asked. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Victor took a slow, deliberate step forward. I'm at the old rail yard, Tommy whispered. Out by the Rust Belt, the abandoned switching station off Route 9. Please, Nori, bring whatever you have. Come alone. I'll be there, Lily said. She lowered the phone and tapped the red button. The silence rushed back into the room, heavier and more suffocating than before. She looked at Victor. He was waiting. Route 9, Lily said, her voice completely stripped of emotion. The abandoned switching station at the old rail yard. Victor held her gaze for a long moment. He didn't smile. He didn't look triumphant. He just looked like a man who had confirmed a grim, inevitable fact of gravity. Get your coat, he said. No. Victor stopped halfway to the console table. He turned back, his brow furrowing slightly. Excuse me. Lily stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she locked her knees, forcing herself to stand tall. She wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. I gave you the location, she said, her voice remarkably steady. I upheld my end of the bargain. Now you uphold mine. Victor's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. We made no bargain regarding his life. We are making one now. Lily fired back, stepping around the table to face him directly. You want to make an example of him? Fine. You want to ruin him? Fine. Break his legs, take his fingers, do whatever barbaric medieval thing you do to prove your point to the streets. But you let him live. He stole $500,000 and involved a cartel in my territory, Victor said, his voice dropping to a lethal, quiet hiss. He dies. That is the math. Then shoot me right now. The words hung in the air. Victor stared at her. The silence stretched until it felt like a physical weight pressing against Lily's chest. She didn't flinch. She had nothing left to lose. She was already dead the moment she misdialed that phone number. If you kill him, Lily said, her voice dropping to a ragged whisper, you kill the only thing tethering me to any kind of humanity. You kill him, and I am nothing but a ghost in your house. I won't eat. I won't speak. You will have to put a bullet in my head to get rid of me, because I will make your life a living hell. Victor looked at her. Really looked at her. He saw the cynical, broken East End girl, but beneath that he saw a spine of absolute steel. She wasn't pleading. She was negotiating. She was speaking his language. He took a step closer. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating off his body, smell the sharp tang of espresso and violence. He reached out, his large hand wrapping around the back of her neck. His thumb brushed over her jawline. It wasn't a gentle touch, but it wasn't painful. It was absolute possession. You are a remarkably foolish creature, Victor murmured, his dark eyes tracing the line of her lips. Deal, or I walk out that door right now and let your Russian shoot me in the back. Victor's jaw tightened. A muscle feathered in his cheek. I will leave him breathing, Victor said softly. But he will wish he wasn't. And when it is done, you belong to me, completely. You do not ask questions. You do not push back. You accept what this is. Lily looked up into his eyes. She saw the darkness there, the absolute void of morality. And God help her, she didn't want to look away. Deal, she whispered. Get your coat. Victor ordered, dropping his hand from her neck. You're coming with me to watch. The black Lincoln cut through the night like a shark through dark water. The rain had returned, a torrential downpour that washed the city streets clean and drummed a frantic rhythm against the roof of the car. Lily sat beside Victor in the back seat. She was wearing a heavy black trench coat he had provided. Neither of them spoke. The air in the cabin was thick, charged with the impending violence. Lev navigated the treacherous potholed roads of the industrial district. Massive rusted silos loomed in the darkness like decaying monuments. Pull up to the south gate, Victor ordered. Cut the headlights. The Lincoln rolled to a stop in the shadows of an old corrugated steel warehouse. Beyond a chain-link fence, the abandoned switching station sat bathed in the sickly amber glow of a single, flickering security light. It was a graveyard of rusted boxcars and overgrown weeds. Stay in the car, Victor said, reaching under his jacket to check the heavy Sig Sauer holstered at his ribs. I'm coming, Lily stated. Victor paused, his hand on the door handle. He looked at her, his eyes cold and assessing. It is going to be ugly. You do not want this burned into your memory. I need him to know I didn't just sell him out, Lily said, her voice tight. I need him to know I traded my life for his. Victor stared at her for a second longer, then pushed the door open. Keep behind me. If shooting starts, you drop to the dirt and do not move. If you run, You will likely get hit. Lily stepped out into the freezing rain. The cold bit into her skin immediately. She fell in line behind Victor as he approached the rusted gate. Lev flanked them to the right, a heavy, suppressed automatic rifle held loosely against his chest. Marco moved into the shadows on the left. They walked into the yard. The gravel crunched under Victor's expensive leather shoes. "Tommy!" Victor's voice boomed over the sound of the rain. It wasn't a shout. It was a command that demanded absolute obedience from the environment itself. A figure emerged from the shadow of a rusted boxcar about 30 yards away. It was Tommy. He was soaked to the bone, his shoulders hunched, shivering violently. He looked hollowed out, a ghost of the arrogant kid he used to be. He saw Lily and took a step forward. Nori, thank God. He didn't see the men in the shadows. He only saw his sister. He took 3 more steps before he registered the towering, broad-shouldered man standing in front of her. Tommy stopped dead. The relief on his face morphed into absolute, paralytic terror. "No," he breathed. "Nori, what did you do?" "I saved your life!" Lily yelled over the rain, stepping out slightly from behind Victor. "They were going to kill you, Tommy! The freelancers, the Colombians, all of them!" "Well, well, well!" A new voice cut through the rain. Thick, accented, and mocking. Victor didn't flinch, but his posture instantly shifted into a predatory crouch. From the shadows behind Tommy, 3 men stepped out. They weren't street thugs. They wore tactical gear. They held short-barreled assault rifles. Cartel muscle. Tommy stumbled backward, looking frantically between the men behind him and Victor in front of him. "You set a trap," Victor said. His voice was calm, conversational, even as the rain pounded down. "I had to!" Tommy shrieked, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "The Colombians said if I gave them you, they'd forgive the debt. They said they wanted the East End. I had no choice." Lily felt the air leave her lungs. He hadn't called for help. He had called to use her as bait. He had sold her out to save his own miserable skin. A cold, heavy numbness washed over her, the last frayed thread connecting her to her old life, to her family, snapped. "You are a disappointment, Tommy," Victor said. The cartel leader raised his rifle. "Drop the weapon, Drossi. We take the territory tonight." Victor didn't raise his hands. He didn't drop his gun. He simply smiled, a terrifying flash of white teeth in the dark. "You think I walk into the dark blind?" Victor asked softly. He didn't even turn his head. He just gave a minute tilt of his chin. The darkness above the boxcars erupted in mechanical spits. Suppressed sniper fire from the rooftops surrounding the yard. Thwip, thwip, thwip. The 3 cartel men dropped simultaneously. No dramatic falls, just strings cut, bodies crumpling into the wet gravel with heavy, dead thuds. Tommy screamed, dropping to his knees and covering his head with his arms. Silence slammed back down on the rail yard, broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain. Victor walked forward slowly. He bypassed the dead cartel men without a glance. He stopped in front of Tommy. Tommy was sobbing into the mud, babbling incoherently. Victor drew his weapon. He pointed the barrel directly at the back of Tommy's head. Lily stood 30 yards away. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just watched. The numbness had taken over completely. Tommy had tried to trade her to a cartel. Victor looked back over his shoulder. Through the curtain of rain, his dark eyes locked onto Lily's. He was waiting for her to release him from his promise, waiting for her to give the order. Lily stared back. She looked at the pathetic, shivering mess of a man on the ground. He wasn't her brother anymore. He was just a rat caught in a trap. Slowly, deliberately, Lily gave a single nod. Victor turned back to Tommy. He lowered the barrel of the gun from Tommy's head down to his right thigh. He pulled the trigger. The loud crack of the gunshot was swallowed by the rain. Tommy shrieked an agonizing, high-pitched wail as his femur shattered. He rolled onto his back, clutching his leg, blood turning the puddles around him black in the dim light. Victor holstered his weapon. He reached down, grabbed Tommy by the collar of his soaked jacket, and hauled him halfway up. "You are alive because she willed it," Victor hissed into Tommy's face. "You will drag yourself out of this city. If you ever cross the state line again, I will not shoot your leg. I will take your head. Now crawl." He dropped Tommy into the mud. Victor turned his back on the screaming man and walked back toward Lily. He stopped in front of her. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead. He looked demonic. He looked like the king of hell. And he was hers. "It's done," Victor said quietly. "Yes," Lily whispered. Victor reached out and pulled her against his chest. His coat was soaking wet, cold, and smelled of gunpowder. But beneath it, his body was a furnace of solid heat. Lily buried her face in his neck, wrapping her arms around him, holding on to the only anchor she had left in a world she had just willingly burned to the ground. She had dialed a wrong number, a single mistake. But as his heavy arms wrapped around her waist, locking her in the dark, dangerous cage of his embrace, she knew it was the most perfect mistake she would ever make. Lily thought hitting a wrong number was the end of her life. It turned out to be the end of her innocence and the violent beginning of her reign beside the most dangerous man in the city. The East End will never be the same, and neither will she. If this gritty, dark romance kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button right now. Share this story with anyone who craves a ruthless mafia boss who falls harder than the enemies he drops. Hit subscribe and ring this bell so you never miss our next descent into the dark. Comment below. Did Victor go too easy on Tommy, or was the punishment perfect? See you in the next one.